Hi, I'm Murphy, and this is my channel, Murphy's Every Whim, where I talk about books, because I love to talk about books. I also love when it's scarf season and hot tea season. I want to talk about a book, and that book is Go With Me by Castle Freeman Jr. And this book, I had said when I put this on my TBR that I didn't remember why it was there, but I think it was recommended to me by a colleague. At one time, I used to send out an email before summer and ask my colleagues what recommendations they have for reading. And this colleague always had recommendations, and this was one of the ones that he recommended. I had been hesitant to read it because it is about stalking, and I was afraid there would be triggers for me based on that. But I decided that since it seemed that the person being stalked was successful in eliminating the stalking, that I would give it a try. And I am so glad I did. This is a good little book. And it is short. It's 160 pages or so. Not only short, but it goes at lightning speed. This is one of the only full-size novels that I have ever read in exactly one sitting. I started reading it and couldn't stop. The main reason I dove into this is because the first chapter made me angry. Angry. So angry. The woman in the story, Lillian, goes to the sheriff to complain about being stalked and terrorized by a man. The sheriff knows who this man is. He actually knew that she was being stalked by this man because this man was the bully of the area. And I don't know if someone who's probably in their 30s or 40s can be called a bully or what, but he not just terrorized her, but he was known for terrorizing other people as well. So Lillian goes to the sheriff and talks to him for a while, and after a while she says, "It seems to me that you're not going to do anything until I'm dead." That's what it seems to me. What does it seem like to you? And the sheriff said, "Yeah, I think the same thing." Absolutely infuriating. I've never had any experience like that. I have had, not stalking, but I have had some problems with men in the past when I was young, when I was a teenager. Young so that I felt powerless. And anybody that I ever said anything to helped me out. So to go to law enforcement and have someone say, "I really can't do anything until you're hurt," pissed me off no end. So I had to see how the book turned out. So the sheriff actually suggested to Lillian that she go to this old chair factory. It was a defunct chair factory. It was currently being run as a sometimes sawmill. And at this factory, the man who owned it, who was disabled, and 3, 4, 5 other guys from the town would just sit in the office there and drink coffee in the morning and then switch over to beer in the afternoon and talk about things. And so in a small town, this was a small town in Vermont that the main industry at one time was forestry. And so in this small town where everybody knows everything, these guys at the defunct chair factory know more than most. So the sheriff suggested to Lillian that she go to the sawmill and talk to these guys. Maybe they could help her out. So she goes there. So, I mean, this is all in like the first 2 chapters. So it's very early in the book. She goes there, and the man who owns it said, I think that these guys can help you out. So he sets her up with a young man, probably maybe still a teenager, who was a big guy. Think Jack Reacher size, who was strong, but maybe not very smart. As he was described, he was smarter than a horse, but not smarter than a tractor. That's pretty cold. So they hooked her up with him and another guy, an older man, maybe in his 70s, with a limp, who wasn't very strong, but knew where they could find the stalker, knew a lot of things. And so these 3 people, Lillian, the woman being stalked, who refuses to give in to her stalker, refuses to accept that the police can't help her, and a young burly man who maybe fights more than he thinks, and an older man who's smart as a whip. They start out in a pickup truck to find the stalker. The rest of the story reads like the labors of Hercules. They have to pass through one trial after another as they are trying to find the stalker. Meanwhile, back at the chair factory, these 4 older men who, with nothing better to do but drink coffee and drink beer, are talking about the whole process. And they're serving as the chorus, like in an ancient Greek theater. And they're filling us in on everybody's lives, the details, the background, why the stalker is stalking Lillian, why the men who went with her, what their life situation is like, why the sheriff can't seem to act. They fill us on all of that. So we alternate between the trials of these 3 heroes and the chorus telling us what's going on. And the dialogue is rapid paced. The characters that we meet are interesting. We end up with our 3 heroes defeating all of their challenges, defeating all of the foes they have to fight along the way, and coming out victorious. This is a good book. Let me rephrase that. This is a very good story. This is a great story. I'm glad I read this book, and I will be looking for things by Castle Freeman Jr. elsewhere to see what else he's written. But this is not a great book. This was published by Harper Perennial, and it was relatively cheaply published. The kerning in this book, the spacing between letters, was so bad that at times I had trouble parsing what the sentence was. So if anything slowed me down in reading this fast-paced book, it was that maybe 10% of it had very bad typesetting. So some words would have a space in the middle of them that made it appear like it was 2 words. Sometimes 2 words would have no space between them. The kerning was so bad in places that sometimes letters were printed on top of other letters. That is so unfortunate because this is a good book. I noticed that there's an Audible version of this. I haven't checked that out to see if it has good reviews, but I hope that it does, because that might be the way to read this book. But I highly recommend Go With Me if you accept the caveat that there are going to be places where you're going to struggle to parse what's being said. Maybe there's been an additional printing and they've resolved that problem. My guess is not. Go With Me, strongly recommend it. And that's what I have today. I'm going to drink some of my tea, sit by the fire, and probably read a book. Take care. Some hot tea. But I always have to wait for the tea to get a little cooler before I can drink it. I also have a fire in the hearth. You know, you turn the switch on behind me, and that's how you get fire. But it's warm enough for he who caters to my every whim to be out playing golf.